So welcome back you through to SABC News Live. Thank you so much for choosing us right now. We continue with conversations right here at the Results Operations Center. We've brought you some of the latest conversations throughout the build-up to this election. And now that it's that day, we continue to crunch some of those conversations. And joining me right here at our makeshift studio at the Results Operations Center is SABC News politics editor Mzwandile Mbeje, as well as politics reporter Natasha Phiri. It's great to have you on the program. Welcome to it.
Thanks for having us, Nko.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Natasha, let's start with you right now. Just give us a sense or an overview of how it's been going thus far, looking at how that board is likely to start coming alive in the next couple of hours. Yeah?
Definitely. So we're about 3 hours away from voting stations being closed. I particularly went to the Itekani Primary School where President Cyril Ramaphosa was voting. It started off slow, but gradually around 11 a.m., I beg your pardon, things started picking up. You go to the voting stations, there's a sense of enthusiasm, around voting. And the IEC actually reiterated those sentiments that, listen, despite the challenges that they faced of some voting ballots or voting materials coming late to various stations, there was a sense of enthusiasm because as early as 7 p.m., even earlier than 7 a.m., you had a lot of people coming out in their numbers, long queues. Mzwai just showed me a video that Jade, our colleague in Durban, had actually tweeted. Long snaking queues. People are really actually coming out in their numbers to vote.
Yeah, and Mr. Mbeje, what does this really mean? Particularly when we look at that, we are now 30 years into democracy, and this election has been likened to that of 1994, where you have many people saying that this is the election that they will be making change. What's the sense on the ground on your part, and what were your insights that you can share with us today?
Well, Mxolisi, and I think that analogy you've made, 1994 being 2024 being our 1994, is actually seen in the expression of what is happening currently. I guess the weather also played part. I mean, it's generally warmer around the country, despite that we are now in some sort of winter, and I think people are taking advantage of that. But more than really that, it's about the fact that South Africans now know that for their conditions to improve, change, or go in a particular direction, they can do that in their own hands. They have their fate in their own hands. This is an expression by South Africans that they indeed do want to make their voice heard. So how that voice will be made will be very interesting. As you were saying with Natasha, in the coming hours, we'll know exactly what is it that South Africans are expressing as they are going to the polls in such big numbers. There's something they are telling us. Of course, we don't know. We'll only know at the end, rather at the close of the polling stations in terms of how much the turnout will be. But the preliminary reports suggest that South Africans are enthusiastic. They want to make their statements. However they want to do it.
And Natasha, speaking of that, you have covered these manifestos as well as the various events. I remember chatting to you as well over the weekend when you were covering a manifesto, a rally, if you may. And what was the sense that you got on the ground, particularly when you look at the youth electorate, because they are the ones with the LGE, the local government elections as well, were the ones who were despondent to a certain extent. So what sense did you get on the ground with your ears firmly there?
I think you're quite right when you talk about youth despondency. I mean, you've got a voting age population of 39 million in the country, and you look at the numbers, you only have 27.6 million people, on the voters' roll. But I think just interacting with young people across all boards from various political parties, those who actually came out to various rallies, young people in this country are hungry for jobs. I mean, our employment rate is at 32.9%, and young people are crying for jobs, saying that, listen, some of them are graduates, some of them have graduated, but there are no jobs in this country. some also say that they can't depend on the SRD grants. They actually need more, So that is the outcry from young people in the country. They also complain not only about service delivery issues, but other issues as well. The issue of load shedding, saying that some are even starting their own businesses, but because they are impacted by load shedding, they can't sustain them. You then have issues of water shedding in other areas whereas young farmers are also impacted. So there's so many issues that young people in this country are facing. And they're basically saying that, listen, they want a government that would not only just give them money, Mxolisi, but ensure that, they've got something sustainable, that where they can create jobs, where there's no red tape in terms of them creating jobs. So this is just a resounding call. But I think one thing you've highlighted about young people in this election or in this campaign season, I don't know if I'm right, Mzwai, you've seen an energized youth. A lot of political parties targeting young people. When they go to these rallies, it's actually young people who actually come out. But the proof is in the pudding. Will we see that, like Mzwai had actually said, on this leaderboard at 9 or after 9 o'clock, will young people actually come out in their numbers to actually vote?
And I want to piggyback off that point that you just make and take it to Mzwai, because Mzwai, what's really inspiring is that we're seeing a youth electorate that is so involved in the public discourse, so involved in everything that we've been seeing unfolding as a build-up towards these very crucial elections right now. What does this tell you right now when we look at South Africa, looking at where we come from, looking at where we are now, and looking at where we're going as a nation?
Mxolisi, as a country, we are a very youthful country, and the decisions that are being made will impact the youth in the future. So if the youth then decides to take a stand, it actually bodes well for this country, because you have people who have decided that, we'll not just sit on our laurels and then just watch people decide for us. At the end of the day, these elders at some point will leave. And then when they leave, so who are we going to be left with? What sort of infrastructure are we going to be left with? So let's get involved. And I think that is what is starting to sink in, particularly for a lot of people. Remember, we come from a legacy of exclusion where the majority of this country actually never participated in the creation and the development of this country. Their only participation was by sort of, it was a by the way. It was a by the way. Now, we are being called upon to decide our own fate, our own destiny. So everyone, as we grow up, we get told that the future is for the young. So if then you are told that the future is for the young, as a young person, you start to then think thoroughly and carefully about that. So what does that mean? So it means whatever decisions are being made are decisions that will benefit us. So that is why you will then start to see them getting involved. It might not necessarily be on a scale which all of us will want, but the fact of the matter is that they are starting to get involved, because when all is said and done, it's about them. Once it's beyond them, it's about their children.
And here's also the thing, what we saw today as well. We saw some of those former head of states casting their ballots today, and you as the politics team was on the pulse of it today. Take us through that, and this was another process of democracy in action, and how did that go?
It's actually a very, as an African country, South Africa, it's actually very beautiful to watch compared to what happens in some other African countries. In other African countries, so you find that the former presidents are not even able to take part because there are issues that have arisen after they've been part of the presidency. Yes, we have our own issues here, but the democratic systems are able to deal with them, to resolve them, so which actually is a feather in the cap in us as a country and a democracy. So when you saw those former presidents, former deputy presidents taking part, the veterans, and also ordinary people, the young and old, black, white, women and children getting involved, you do see that as much as South Africans are very critical of their country, we are a very critical nation about our country, but we do that because we have the interest of this country at our hearts.
Yeah, for sure.
What Mzwai was saying, just despite our former presidents and whatnot actually voting today, it was quite interesting to see our international observers. You had former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan actually at the voting station where President Cyril Ramaphosa was voting, and he lauded the IEC for a job well done, saying that the Commission is one of the most transparent actually on the African continent, right? But he had also raised a few teething problems here and there, issues of the ballots and etc. But I mean, in our country, we're a country that actually accommodates, prisoners or those who actually are in correctional services right now. We saw those voting in the morning. We also have South Africans that actually voted abroad. And in some countries, this actually doesn't happen. So it speaks to also the credibility also of our electoral body, but also President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking out against those elements that seek to undermine the credibility of the IEC. Mxolisi.
And here's the thing, you as the politics team have been at the helm of covering some of the most biggest elections, even not just around the continent, but around the world. You'll had your pulse also on it as well as our politics desk. And just at the back of that, Natasha, looking at our IEC and Mzwai, do you think we've managed to really pull it off as South Africa? Because we've got one of the best constitutions in the world, hailed the best. How would you rate how this whole process has unfolded so far?
In fact, our IEC is ranked among the best in the world. Many IECs, of course, they call them their own names, but so many electoral bodies in the world, so they look towards South Africa to see how we do it. In fact, I was actually very interested. I think is it a Republican congressman in the US. They were debating their own constitution, which is, in my view, very archaic. Of course, not to throw shade at the American Constitution, but there are certain things which I think they still need to change. They basically said America must just adapt South African Constitution and adapt it to America. And what does that tell you? If a congressman were to say that about our own Constitution, it is because of what it is producing. Yes, it's not without its own flaws. It's not without its own criticism. But the fact of the matter is that it is a foundation upon which and the world realizes that this is what really can stand the world in good stead. Look at the stance we have taken in Palestine and in Israel. We did something that nobody thought of doing. Why? Because we are inspired by that constitution you are speaking about. That constitution which is the foundation of bodies like this IEC that we trust so much. So, yes, there will be problems here and there, but on the whole, we are excelling.
And adding to that, sorry,
sure.
I think a lot of people don't know that, like Mzwai was saying, that the IEC is actually ranked very high as electoral body. We are the chair of the Association of World Electoral Bodies. We are also the secretariat of electoral bodies on the African continent. So, a lot of electoral bodies on the African continent are actually taking leaf from what we do as, the IEC this side.
And Natasha, being a young reporter yourself right now, and you've spoken at length about the youth, and I'm sure covering an election of this magnitude, these watershed elections come with something for you, for your career as well as a journalist. Perhaps just share some of your reflections with us on this platform today to say that maybe this was one of the best yet.
I think that so far it has been one of the best yet. The opportunities I was also given by Mzwai here as, the leader of our politics desk, and also just learning a lot, and also just helps also having institutional memory with the people that we work with, people who will point you in the right direction to say, okay, by the way, there was this, then that actually happened, But I think that the aspect of learning a lot, going to read, through what actually happened back in 1994. We weren't around back then, but this is for me a milestone, and I'm really honored to actually have this opportunity.
And Mzwai, before we wind down our conversation from here, Talk us through what happens then as we will start seeing some of the numbers trickle in and that board come to life.
Well, from about it's an estimated guess or an educated guess.
Yeah.
From about 1 a.m. if we are late, about 3 a.m. we will start to see the first results come through that board. And ordinarily, you know, some of those stations, there are stations that are very small where counting can be done very quickly. So that will start, and then the IEC will do it very officially when it is to post those results. So everything will stop, and then there will be a clock that will count, and then those results will start trickling in, and that is the start of that board changing. And that journey will be a very long journey, particularly for all those parties, because the work Mxolisi that they've put through for the past 3 months will now be determined by what happens there. So was it worth it that you crisscrossed the country? Was your message heard? Did you even have to do it? That is the answer. You know, the political parties, there's nothing they can do now. Even if we can give them the entire airtime and the spaces, there's nothing they can do. So they got that chance, they put their message across. South Africans heard. What is it that they heard? The answer will be there.
But I'm also keen on finding out just how long that journey is going to be, because you're talking about a journey now that starts now when that board comes to light. And critics as well as analysts have come out to say that this may be a very long journey that may take us weeks, months, or can be even litigious to a certain extent. How long is the journey going to be, Mzwai?
That will depend on the outcome. If, for example, it's clear-cut, South Africans decide to award whichever party with the majority, really there isn't much to contest, unless there are serious breaches elsewhere. So other than that, but here is your question where I think it's coming from. If South Africans decide to give the half-half in terms of the votes, that is a long journey, because you may be faced with a situation of of coalitions. And discussing and negotiating coalitions is not easy. We've seen at the local level, just imagine at a national level.
Diabolical.
It will be something that will be very, very, very long. But remember, the Constitution needs us to conclude this process as soon as possible. So it will be a new territory altogether if we get there. But let's see and wait. It's not long before that is answered.
Yeah. And Natasha, what do you have to add to that before I let you guys go?
Listen, let's just tune into SABC News. We will give you rolling coverage. We are waiting with bated breath. Like Mzwai had said, that the work starts in from 1 a.m. So we'll be here to actually give you all the latest updates in, in regards to the elections. But I mean, interesting times ahead. And like he said, at the end of the day, the fate of South Africans is in those voters that actually went out to go vote in their numbers. Political parties have no say whatsoever. So we'll just wait and see the results.
Oh, and just a quick one. We're also expecting a media briefing to happen and take place. Please give us just a gist of what that is likely to be about.
So definitely the IEC will be briefing us members of the media,
Yeah.
On the updates. I know there was some problems with their voter management devices. The EFF has now recently come out in a statement, just raising their concerns about these devices and saying that it's now actually causing long queues, and some people might actually feel despondent and discouraged and actually leave those voting stations. The issue of the ballots not coming in, some voting stations opening up late. There's also the issue of the 20 voting stations that actually opened after 9 a.m. due to community protests in eThekwini. But of course, through Nat joins, the police were actually on top of that. There is one voting station in the Eastern Cape that was not open because the community in the area had barred all the community members from going there because they were actually protesting over land issues. So we expect the IEC to actually just, update us on some of these developments.
Okay, Natasha Phiri is the SABC News politics reporter as well as politics editor right here at the SABC. Mzwandile Mbeje, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Looking forward to more engagement right here on SABC News Live. This is where we park it for now, but of course more conversations as well as analysis continues, because as a channel we are here on the pulse of it all. Do stay tuned.